Well, hi there, and welcome to this guided meditation and talk. My name is Jonathan Foust. I am happy to have you here. A little bit of context for what we're going to be doing now. I am actually right now on the IMCW fall retreat with 100 or so people, and what I'm going to do is lead a shorter meditation, and then I just realized that my talk from the New Year's retreat earlier this year was never posted. So we're going to then go to my talk, which is the first night's talk at the New Year's retreat. So this will be a shorter meditation, and then we'll just dive right into that. So I will be leading a number of reflections during that talk. So you will be able to work in a little bit more meditation then. At any rate, I'm really, really happy to see you here. Very, very quickly, just to say thank you to our mindful movement teachers. Thank you to our mindful dialogue leaders as well. Just to know that if you'd like to kind of have the full experience here on Monday nights, you can join the mindful movement led beautifully by three wonderful teachers. That starts at 6:30. This starts at 7:30 Eastern Standard, and afterward you can join Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy for some time for discussion. So please feel free, check out those Zoom links on my website and on my Facebook page. As well, thank you for your support for making all this happen. And the people who make that happen are Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo. So thank you both for all you do to help get this out there. You can always sign up for a mailing list, stuff on my mailing list. And again, this is all offered freely. So thank you so much for your support. Without further ado, let's dive into this meditation because this will be relatively short. You might like to reach your arms up overhead, stretch up. So we're going to see where we go in about 13 minutes. So it's always a question of like, how quickly can we drop in? So with your eyes closed, one way to cultivate a sense of deepening is through concentration. Concentration brings you back again and again and again and again to the here and now, which begins to calm the nervous system. So what you might do is focus on your breath and just begin to slow down your breath, about twice as slow as you might normally breathe. And just notice how when you slow down your breath, you slow down your sense of time. So for the next minute or so, the invitation here is to breathe not only slow, but also deep. And one more factor here, which it's subtle but can have a very, very powerful effect. So if you would, you're breathing slow, you're breathing deep, and now try breathing smooth, so the breath is really smooth. And feel that inner flow where you shift from the in-breath to the out-breath. Just feel the effect. Just a few rounds of breath can be this wonderful invitation to arrive. And as you breathe, let your attention come right to the inside of your mouth. We tend to hold a lot of tension here. So if you would, just notice and feel the inside of your mouth and feel the volume of your lips. Notice now if it's possible to relax your tongue. Let your tongue begin to fill your lower jaw. Notice if you can begin to sense if you can relax your jaw, to soften the jaw, and at the same time, relax the root of the tongue down into your throat. Feel your face smooth, face expressionless. And feel or imagine the space inside your throat. And imagine and feel the weight of the shoulders and the weight of the arms. And imagine this sense of heaviness, of volume, might draw your attention inward even more. Could you soften the belly? Could you soften the palms of the hands? And notice any sense of aliveness here. Could you in any way relax the soles of your feet and your heels? And just sense on the inside right now, the inside of the body, is there anything right now that could soften or relax? Let the breath be effortless and free-flowing. And imagine now that you could take what is sometimes called the seat of the witness and let your attention move to an anchor of your choosing. Maybe it's to the movement of the breath at the belly or the nostrils or wherever you feel the breath is strongest. You might have your anchor be on the sound vibrations or maybe the feeling in the palms. Let this be your primary point of concentration. Just feeling from the inside, this breath, these sound vibrations, any sense of pulse and tingling. And for this next little bit of time, when the mind is far away, just gently guide it back. Relaxing and feeling from the inside. And can you sense this quality of deep relaxation and at the same time this quality of alertness? When your mind wanders, as it naturally does, notice if you can associate a feeling of pleasure. I'm awake. I'm no longer dreaming. And then relax and feel. And come again to this point of attention here at your anchor. And you may notice as you, again, relax and soften and feel from the inside, a feeling of foreground and background. Your anchor is in the foreground, and in the background there's this sense of everything that's changing, the flow or the stream of your experience. And you might now, in these minutes, sense what it's like to toggle between relaxing, feeling your anchor, and then widening your awareness to be awake to what is changing. You might explore now this balance in meditation. There's a quality of doing. You're focusing on the breath. You're calling your attention back. There's a quality of flow, of being aware of what is changing. And there's a quality of allowing, a quality of letting things be. And you might explore what it's like to soften the practices of doing and open now to this sense of being. What could relax or soften or let go right now? Can you widen your awareness to notice the sense of flow, the stream of what you're aware of? And is it possible to let it all be? Is there anything right now that could relax or soften inside? Is there anything right now that could allow and let be even more? Notice the quality of presence right now. Sounds around you, the sense of the air touching your skin. This quality of being both relaxed and alert. And you might very gently now begin to deepen your breath and let your head drift a little bit to the left, to the right. Let your body begin to move and stretch in any way that feels good for you. You might imagine, as we transition to this talk, that you're on a retreat, and it's a 7-day retreat. 7 days of silence, 7 days of sitting meditation, walking meditation, having your meals in silence very mindfully. This following talk is the opening talk. It's the first talk helping to set the stage for your practice. You might imagine that you're also doing this with a few hundred people. Enjoy. And I wish you well. And many blessings. Welcome. Jonathan here. Day 1 is drawing to a close, and I'm happy to share with you for the next little while. In my recollection of sitting retreats in the past, I've noticed this phenomena on the first talk of a particular retreat for me. That is, when I'm listening, I can see the speaker's lips move. I can hear their voice, but I'm so exhausted, none of it is actually coming into my head. So if that's happening for you, just relax. I like this image that Gil Fronsdal offered, that when you listen to a Dharma talk, just think of it as a shower. Just let it kind of pour over you, and if anything needs to get in, it will. I remember the first month-long retreat I went to. I called a good friend of mine and I said, "Hey, you want to join me for this month-long? It'll be fun." It wasn't fun. I had no idea what challenges lay ahead of me in that month. So many different mind states and so many different and challenging memories arose. It was really hard. But at the same time, have you ever noticed that the most difficult times when you look back are filled with the most growth and the most insight? I'm not wishing you a hard, difficult, and lousy retreat, but I do want to talk today about some of the things today that I found helpful in my practice, especially when you're launching into a time of intensive practice, as you are. I have grown so much through my practice, and a lot of it has come from simply, I don't know where, having the courage to stay present, to keep calling on resources that help me to be with what's there. And I'm very excited for this retreat. I'm excited for you to have these days of intensive practice. It is such a rare thing. What I'd like to talk about in the next little while is first just to celebrate that you're here, to honor the call to practice. The second is, once you hear the call to practice, honoring the obstacles and the challenges that come up and some of the skillful means that might be helpful for you. And third, I'd like to talk about kind of the number one essential refuge for your practice, which is taking refuge in the body and exploring some of the skillful means for navigating your practice through this amazing vehicle of your body. And fourth, I'd like to talk a little bit about ways that you might call on your capacity to be with what's here. That really remembering the why of practice, particularly when you might hit some challenging times. In that month-long retreat, during the question and answer, I think it was week 3, someone raised their hand, they stood up and they said, "I'm just curious, does anyone here wonder what would have happened if they took the blue pill?" And you might remember from The Matrix, to quote Morpheus, "This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe what you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more." I can't think of anything more Buddhist than Morpheus's line there. And for whatever reason, here we are taking the red pill, just to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. And there's something extraordinary about, number one, hearing the call to practice and to wake up. And number two, actually responding to it. Many of us know of the Buddha's call to practice. In his youth, very sheltered, encountering sickness, old age, death, and then seeing a renunciate, someone who was withdrawn from the world and engaging in the practice. That is what called him. What is it that goes beyond sickness and old age and death? And I think it's so important to reflect on what is it that has called you? What are you hoping for this week? How would you like to feel at the end of this retreat? We all have different reasons why we're called to practice. This may be your first retreat. You may have read about what can happen when you engage into intensive practice. Maybe you know someone who's shared what happened to them on retreat. Maybe you've had some really powerful experiences and you want to explore what can happen when you apply these technologies. Maybe this is required for your training. Maybe you've done lots and lots of retreats and this is just one more step on your path of awakening. But there's something amazing about the call to practice. The call to practice requires sacrifice. You're giving something up for this experience. You're setting aside time, you're setting aside money, and you're investing into this and to see what's here. So anytime you feel a call and you start to set off on your journey, in many cases, it's helpful to have a destination in mind. Where are you going? And then when you have an idea where you want to go, you take a look at the map and you read some travel guides. And there you learn what roads to avoid, what roads are the most efficient, what are the places you just have to visit, what are the dangerous parts of town that you should avoid. And it's the same when you engage into a meditation, the journey of awakening. And we have these reference points from those who have walked this journey before us. We've talked a little bit in our opening about some of the things you can do that can support you. I'd like to kind of refer back to those, but I'd also like to talk about some of the challenges, some of the hairpin turns, the gnarly roads that can lead you astray and how you might navigate through them. There's a very paradoxical thing about being on retreat. While you are consciously engaging into your experience and lots of things will arise, you're also just sort of opening to what occurs. As one of my teachers said, once you're on the bus, you can put down your bags. And the guidelines for this retreat are not just created at random. They're really kind of the best practices that will help you to stay the course. What I find is the more I can allow myself to begin to settle into the rhythms of a retreat and to kind of get clear for myself the practices I'm going to engage into, but also to get clear on the practices I'm not going to engage into, which are primarily those which are going to distract me, to get very clear about my relationship to my electronic device, etc., etc. Once I kind of settle in, it's not so much about doing the retreat. It's more about letting the retreat do you. There's the old classic joke. If you meditate, you'll feel better. You feel your anger better, your depression better, your anxiety better, your grief better. And also your capacity for kindness better. Your capacity for compassion and joy and presence are all part of feeling better. And your capacity to embrace your moment as it unfolds inevitably will take you into some very deep feeling places. So once you set off on your journey, inevitably you start encountering some challenges as part of this metaphor of the hero's journey. The Buddha's story is a classic hero's journey story. As he set off, he encountered all kinds of challenges. And kind of in this sort of mythological approach, Odysseus was a legendary hero in Greek mythology. He's sort of the main protagonist in the Odyssey. And when he set off on his journey was actually more of coming home. It took him 10 years to come home from a battle. And I kind of like that idea of coming home because we're really coming home to ourselves. We're coming home to what's true, to seeing more clearly. And in his journey, he hit a lot of trials, but I'd like to talk about one in particular. There are horrible storms. He was battling demons. on and on and on. But but one of the classic things he went through was he had to sail past the island of the sirens. And the sirens were these incredible sounds and voices that would kind of lure and seduce people into the island, and they would be destroyed. So what he decided was that he wanted to know what this was all about. So he had the men on his crew stuff their ears, and he had them tie himself to the mast. And he said, "Whatever I say, do not untie me." And so while he was lashed to the mast and they passed the island, these amazing exotic voices called out to him. Some of them were seductive. Some of them were sort of rage-inducing. Some filled him with grief, and some filled him with fear. They were utterly compelling. And as he was lashed to the mast, he was saying to the crew, untie me, you idiots, let me go." And they didn't. And he passed by the island of the sirens. And that's such a powerful metaphor for all the inner voices. And as you cultivate this sense of mindfulness, as you cultivate this sense of present moment, non-judging awareness, all these unheard and unseen voices may arise in your practice. And the question is it possible to stay present to them? We'll be talking about the art of navigating this journey past your own personal island of the sirens. There may be times when you may be able to motor through, other times when you may find yourself caught. And how do you work with that? When the times when you are caught, when you lose that sense of mindfulness and you get deeply triggered and deeply identified with something that's arising. And so as you've been on your boat navigating along today, has the day gone how you planned? A short little reflection, if you will. If you like, you can close your eyes, and this will be just for a few moments. And as you close your eyes, you might just take 3 slow, deep breaths. And as you breathe, allow yourself just to relax and soften inside. What could relax right now? What could soften? When you think back on this day of practice, was there anything today that surprised you? And I'd like to ask 2 questions. The first, again, as you reflect back over this day, can you recall any moments that were challenging for you? And you might just pick out maybe one moment during the day that you found to be difficult or challenging. You might just deepen the breath a little bit and just sense, what did that feel like inside? Is there a sense of how it shifted, if it shifted indeed? And the second question, can you recall a moment today of something that was a delight for you? Perhaps just a moment of stillness or a sense of some kind of shift inside. And again, you might just deepen the breath a little bit and just sense, where did you feel that inside? And you might just sense for a moment, if you can recall anything during the day that you might have felt, anywhere you felt contraction, any sense of tightening, any moments of expansion. And you might just sense that within that expansion and contraction, this quality of awareness, of that which is aware. And if you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes, or feel free to remain with them closed. And this contraction, expansion is so much a part of our experience. And the more you can stay with your experience, the more you may begin to feel this sort of arising of mindfulness, this capacity to observe without judgment. And that's what I'd like to talk a little bit is about these 5 different states that can arise. These are sort of classical teachings, the classical list teachings. Sometimes they're called the 5 obstacles, sometimes the 5 hindrances. Sometimes they're referred to as the 5 coverings, these qualities that kind of cover true nature, the 5 weather systems of the mind, or if you like, the 5 growth opportunities that will find you. And as I kind of moved through these, I was tempted to ask for a hand raise if you had noticed this, but I'm pretty sure we would get 100% participation, so we'll pass that. But you may have noticed, as you reflect back on your day, some qualities of wanting mind. A quality of mind that just simply is caught in desire. These are the moments of planning, the moments where you're just lost in fantasy. Someone in their practice shared in a small group, this was a number of years ago, right after one of the meditations, she said, that what a great meditation, she said. I just redesigned my entire living room, and I'm really excited to get started when this retreat is over. And you may notice how when your mind naturally goes into desire, planning, fantasy, it is utterly disassociated from the body. And the more I notice just how my mind gets lost in planning and fantasy, it's quite humbling just to realize how unfiltered the mind can be and how shameless the mind can be. So there's that desire of like reaching, wanting quality of mind, which is sort of balanced by the other extreme, which is the mind that gets caught in that weather system of judgment and aversion. It's judging, it's comparing, it's ill will, it's getting caught in hatred. And you may notice how sometimes you're irritated by something that's happening here on retreat. And sometimes that arising of aversion has nothing to do with what's happening now, but it might be a memory, or it might be a thought of the future. Another energy system that can arise is restlessness. And restlessness is this quality of anxiety, of hypervigilance. It's kind of connected to worry. And quite often, you can find yourself realizing just how, in a high state of alarm your mind is as you begin to settle. Of course, this goes against nature. The basic rule of the jungle is if you close your eyes for too long, you'll be someone's breakfast. And there's a process of settling that can occur when you recognize how your mind may be caught in hypervigilance or jumpiness. The opposite of that restless mind is the sloth and torpor mind. It's the heaviness, the sleepiness, and the density that can occur. And inevitably for particularly the first few days of retreat, sloth and torpor, that heaviness and sleepiness it's a big part of our experience. And I was just sharing in a small group how I found that when I'm really caught in that sleepy swamp, it can be really helpful to ask yourself, is this sleepiness biological? Or is this kind of psycho-emotional? And what I find is if I really listen, I can get a pretty good distinction. And chances are it might be biological. If you are at all depleted or exhausted or overstimulated, when you take that external stimulation away, you may find yourself really, really exhausted. And so it can be very skillful to respond to that in a wholesome way, to take some extra time for rest. And you may find that as you respond to the biological fatigue, over time you'll begin to find yourself feeling a little more alive. Your empty cup may begin to fill. We'll talk a little more about kind of balancing, how to balance that. So this weather system of desire can just absolutely take over. The weather system of aversion can just completely hijack the mind. The restless mind feels out of control. The sloth and torpor mind is there's just no way to stimulate it when it's exhausted. And the fourth weather system is doubt. Those are the moments of doubting yourself, doubting your choices. It's very tied into the ruthless critic. You may have had thoughts, there's no way I'm going to make it through this week. Or maybe you've had a moment in meditation where you take a peek at the screen and everyone looks so serene and you're convinced that you're the only one who's struggling and doing it wrong. And doubt can be an absolute crippler. But there's some good news here. And the good news is there are only 5 of these states. The bad news is that they can infiltrate in really, really sneaky ways. And one way I like to think of these is this, one of the translations of this is the word covering. That when you're in one of these states and you're identified with it, it's like how the clouds have obscured the sun. It's impossible to see the sun. The sun is always shining, but along the way, these states come and go, like weather systems. So the good news is that you can actually wake up inside these states. It's possible to recognize what's happening. An example. Many, many years ago, when I was living in West Africa, I was studying French as part of my preparation for teaching in the university. And I was struggling with it. I had spoken some before, but really, really working with it and just challenged, how just being totally immersed in the language. And where I lived was right near some of the federal buildings. And I had a big house and lots of travelers came through and I kind of freely shared my house. And the only thing I cared about in the whole world materially was my boombox. And I had a bunch of cassette tapes that people had given me. Now, some of you may not know what a cassette tape is, but it was a way of playing music. And someone who was visiting me, and the key was just kept the key outside, was some local guys came back and opened the house, and these guys saw where the key was, and they stole my boombox. And these 2 guys had the audacity to come back to my house and offer to sell my boombox back to me. It was one of the few times when I actually kind of saw red. I was so angry. And I just started tearing into these guys in French, just absolutely infuriated. And as I'm like ripping along, I suddenly had this thought: you are speaking the best French you've ever spoken. And then suddenly I just broke into a smile and started laughing, and then of course tried to cover it up to keep the tough thing going. But I like that story because I was so identified with the anger, and then somehow I became aware of the anger. And this becomes a gigantic difference in practice. It's the difference between being angry and being with your anger. It's the difference between being sad and being with your sadness. We speak sometimes of this concept of the witness, of this capacity to observe without judgment. And this becomes a very powerful part of practice. As you again and again re-arrive in your experience, as you more and more over time begin to cultivate this sense of mindfulness, of your capacity to observe without judgment, moment to moment, a couple things will start to arise for you. One is your capacity to recognize what's happening as it's happening. As you become less and less distracted and more present, that you can actually feel your in-breath as you're breathing in and feel the out-breath as you're breathing out. But it's not just recognizing what's happening as it's happening. You'll also begin to recognize your relationship to what's happening. That you will have the capacity to observe the attitude in your mind. You will start to become more aware of the arising of pleasant and unpleasant and neutral phenomena and see how your whole organism responds to it. You'll become more and more aware of your habitual ways of reacting, and in that, perhaps begin to see how you can begin to respond to life rather than react to life. This is kind of the miracle of mindfulness. It's the miracle of waking up out of the trance. And this is probably a good time to mention an acronym that you may be familiar with. The acronym of RAIN, which we'll be diving into through the week. The R is to recognize or realize what's presenting. The A is to sense, inquire if you can allow it or accept it. The I is to actively investigate what's presenting. And the N is to nourish what you find with some quality of loving presence. And I'd like to talk primarily around these first two, is the power of recognizing, to give your experience a name. When there's anger, just to name it. When there's restlessness, just to name it, restless. And what happens in the process of naming is, as soon as you name it, you create a little bit of space between it and you. And it opens up this possibility of being with it rather than being identified with it. And inevitably, as you begin to settle more and more, and everything between you and feeling free starts to arise, to be greeted, everything unseen, unfelt finds its way into the light of awareness. It's so important to ask yourself, when you name it, to ask, can I allow this? Is it okay to make room for this? And it's important to point out here, and we'll certainly reinforce this week, that when you ask that question, for example, if grief may arise, that spontaneous rogue wave of grief comes to pass through, and you ask yourself, can I be with this? It's important to listen deeply and listen into the body. You may get a felt sense from the body that says, yeah, I can be with this. Or you might get a felt sense saying, not now. It becomes such an important part of the practice as we're cultivating this kind of safe and sacred space for being really, really present. And if you find that it doesn't feel okay, it's so skillful to let it know you see it. Let it know another time, when the conditions are different, your intention is to be with it. But then turn your attention elsewhere. We'll be diving more into the art of investigation. I'll talk about that a little bit more today, but certainly more into the retreat. And the art of nourishing, the art of self-metta, of calling on loving presence. This is this beautiful mechanism for working with challenges as they arise, recognizing, sensing if you can allow, making room, investigating and getting familiar with what's there, and sensing if you can hold it with loving presence. Inevitably what occurs is another metaphor that goes back to the hero's journey. That when you're really committed to becoming more awake, the analogy is to imagine a big circle, a line through that circle. Above the line is everything you're aware of. And below the line is that which you're not aware of yet, is the unfelt, unseen elements of your experience. You can move the line, relaxing and paying attention. That's what moves the line. The more you soften, the more you relax, the more you'll feel. And so the question is, when you are in challenging moments, how do you bring yourself into the present moment? How do you come back to the here and now when you're caught in fear, desire, restlessness, sloth, and torpor, and doubt? And Blah made a very strong reference to this in their instructions this morning. I'd like to spend a little more time on this. And this is about mindfulness of the body. I'd like to share again the quote from this morning, words from the Buddha. I declare that it is in this fathom-long body, with its perceptions and thoughts, that there is the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to the cessation of the world. Or as another well-known teacher said, everything you seek is found within. Perceptions and thoughts in the body. So, how do we do this? There's a little model that I find helpful. That when you begin to be fully and deeply present to the phenomena that's arising in any given moment, kind of at the base level is just life force. It's energy, sort of non-differentiated energy. It's what animates your body, prana, chi, ki, Holy Spirit. That aliveness will form into a feeling tone of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Very, very primal. This very primal arising of pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, and that which lies in between. Referred to kind of as Vedana in this tradition, the feeling tone. Before even being aware of that formation of unpleasant, pleasant, and neutral, it'll move right into a thought form. And usually, habitually, if it's unpleasant, there'll be some self-protective measure. If it's pleasant, there'll be some measure that's associated with greed and desire. And if it's in between, usually there's boredom. It just doesn't register. And so as we're so identified with our thoughts, oh, this is a pleasant feeling. This reminds me of that time when I went on that picnic. That was such a really, really good time. I wonder if I could do that again. I haven't been on a picnic in a really, really long time. I should call someone. We should do that. Oh, but we're in lockdown. The mind proliferating, going on and on and on. If you think the same thought over and over and over again, that thought will harden into a belief. If you're not aware of beliefs and how they operate in your system, they will form your habits. If you're not aware of the habits in your life, those habits will form your character, and your character becomes your destiny. So this natural kind of arising of our experience in the world arises from that primal moment of energy forming in the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral in the body, and then moving into thought, belief, habit, character, and structure. So just as we are in our practice in meditation of moving from the mind back to the here and now in the body, it becomes this level of attention which opens up all kinds of new possibilities. All kinds of new possibilities. You may have noted in your experience when maybe you found yourself caught in some obsessive thinking. And when you stop to sort of recognize that obsessive thinking, just a little example, as someone was sharing earlier, how they just kept thinking about this relationship that was really, really troubling them, where they had felt hurt and they never got closure on it. They began to recognize that, wow, I'm just thinking about this. Could I get a little bit more familiar with it? And they recognize, well, there's actually some emotion here. Now, an emotion, you could say, is a label from the mind with a sensation from the body. And as I began to kind of sense, wow, there's some real anger here, then the inquiry was, can I locate that? And she noticed that there was a clench around the heart, that there was a kind of an elevated blood pressure. And she recognized that just by seeing where it lived on the inside, something began to shift. And this is a little bit of what I'd like to talk about with the remaining time I have. It's a classic phrase, your issues are in your tissues. That anything you feel on an emotional level has a resonance in the body. It lives inside. And if you find yourself caught in obsessive thinking, or when the mind's really fixated, inevitably you may find that there's an emotion attached to that, which you also may be able to track back into the body. You are a mind-body matrix. What exists in the mind exists in the body. So I'd like to read you some pieces here. This piece was written by, it was on the internet, so first of all, we know it's true. And the story is, this was written by a doctor of Chinese medicine that speaks so beautifully about what lies in the body. And I'd like to recommend that you close your eyes while I read this. And just imagine that the words that I'm reading are kind of coming from within. There's a phrase which you may be familiar with called the felt sense. And the felt sense is how your body holds an experience. And when you're experiencing grief, there's a felt sense of grief when you begin to turn your attention to how that lives on the inside. So if you like, you can close your eyes. And as we're exploring being present in the body, you might just take a moment and sense, is there anything that could soften right now? Could you relax your tongue? Could you soften the backs of your hands? Is it possible in some way to feel into the belly and allow, if it feels right, a sense of softening here? You might take a moment just to allow your awareness to open to the senses, the sounds around you, the air touching your skin. And in your own way, just sense inside. And allow these words just to flow through as the voice of this felt sense inside. I am the pain in your head, the knot in your stomach, the unspoken grief in your smile. I am your high blood sugar, your elevated blood pressure, your fear of challenge, your lack of trust. I am the shortness of breath, your fragile low back, the cramp in your neck, the despair in your sigh. I am where you hurt, the fear that persists, your sadness of dreams unfulfilled. I am your symptoms, the causes of your concern, the signs of imbalance, your condition of dis-ease. You tend to disown me, suppress me, ignore me, inflate me, coddle me, condemn me. I'm not coming forth for myself, as I am not separate from all that is you. I come for your attention, to enjoin your embrace so I can reveal my secrets. I have only your best interests at heart as I seek health and wholeness by simply announcing myself. Usually you want me to go away immediately, to disappear, to slink back into obscurity. You mostly are irritated or frightened, many times shocked by my arrival. And from this stance, you medicate in order to eradicate me. You ignore me, not explore me. And so I implore you, I'm a messenger with good news, as disturbing as I can be at times. I am wanting to guide you back to those tender places in yourself. A place where you can hold yourself with compassion and honesty. If you look beyond my appearance, you may find that I am a voice from your soul. I might ask you to alter your diet, get more sleep, exercise regularly, breathe more consciously. I might encourage you to see a vaster reality and worry less about the day-to-day fluctuations. I may ask you to explore the bonds and the wounds of your relationships. I might have you laugh more, spend more time in nature, eat when you're hungry and less when pained or bored. Spend time every day, if only for a few minutes, being still. You are a being so vast, so complex, with amazing capacities for self-regulation and healing. Let me be one of the harbingers that leads you to the mysterious core of your being, where insight and wisdom are naturally available when called upon with a sincere heart. If you like, you might deepen your breath. Or if you like, you can remain with your eyes closed. This possibility that your issues are indeed in your tissues, that the more you relax, the more you can feel. The more you can feel, the more you can sense what is arising and how it wants you to be with it. This is the magic of practice. And it's interesting how the movement from the mind to the body can just be one breath. And you might, if you like, just take a moment and again, close your eyes if they were open. And if you would, let your awareness flow down your right arm and flood into the right hand. Notice how intimately you can soften. And you may notice now, the more you relax the palm, the thumb, the fingers, the more intimately you may be able to feel. Is it possible to sense the pulse or tingling or vibration? I love this sense of practice as thinking of it in terms of receiving the moment directly through sensations. And you may notice as you just simply feel what's happening here, right in the right hand, that sensations are changing always. It's vibration. And you may find that sensations can have a quality of a positive charge or a negative charge or a neutral charge. And you may find another quality that the sensations in your right hand right now are happening without you having to do anything. And you might, as you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And if you like, you can open your eyes or feel free to stay with them closed. As you, in your practice, again and again, relax and soften and be awake to what is arising in the here and now in the body, there are three things just simply to note. To note first how sensations are constantly changing. This characteristic of impermanence becomes immediately clear. The second characteristic you may notice is that there is some quality of mind that is reacting all the time to sensation. Anything subtly pleasant will call for a leaning in, a grasping. Anything unpleasant will, again, tends to invoke a reactivity around pushing away or self-protection. And when there's not a lot going on, you'll notice the mind is very hard to stay present. So this has to do with this quality of dukkha, the quality of when you try to keep your experience just as it is, it's going to change. And the degree to which you resist that change, you will feel dissatisfaction. And the third quality, just to name, is this quality of anatta. And this refers to all that is changing, which is happening all by itself. It points to this idea of not self. And when you can take that stance of receiving the moment as it's happening, to sense how everything changes, and how when you're not resisting, you open into a sense of flow. And how, when you're not resisting, there can be this moments sometimes, just moments of deep allowing and abiding in presence. All this happens through your relationship with this arising felt sense of the body. Now, when you're working with strong energies and you begin to notice, well, how is this strong emotion showing up in my body? How can you begin to train yourself to be more aware of what's happening inside? There are just a few things I'd like to point out. That is, where we tend to feel the most is kind of in the midline, in the core of the body. So it can be from the eyes, the inside of the mouth, the throat, the heart, the chest, the belly, down deep into the guts. And there's kind of three qualities I find that predominate. that this felt sense of the body as you tune in, that one quality you'll notice will be very strong. You can't miss it. And that's the lump in your throat. That's the ache in your heart. That's that sick, twisted feeling in your guts, like something horrible is going to happen. It's just the burning around your eyes, like your eyes are about to tear up. You can't miss it. Another quality, as you train your attention to simply relax and rest and be in this arising of sensation, is that felt sense feeling. It'll either flicker or it'll be like a wave. It's there and then you can't find it. Like, wow, that deep wave of dread kind of felt like grief. Well, I can't find it now. It just passes through. The third quality is really part of this line between what you're aware of and what you're not aware of, and that is this felt sense will feel vague and unformed and amorphous. It's just on the edge of feeling what it is, and the magic word here is something. There's just something kind of heavy around my heart, or there's something here in my belly that feels like a fist. And again, as we come back to this practice of rain, recognize it, just name it. Ask really deeply if it's okay to be with it. Sometimes your body will say, not now. And if you elect to really explore it and investigate it, just sense what it's like to get more familiar with it. Sense if you can call on loving presence. All of this happens by itself. Inevitably, when I'm on retreat and I'm aware that this is all a practice of coming in contact with what is unseen, unfelt, and undigested, quite often something will arise and I'll think, oh, not this, anything but this. And what I find helpful for myself when I am beset with those challenging winds, the 5 growth opportunities, and struggling with the felt sense of the body, is remembering why. Why am I practicing? Why am I here? A number of years ago, I was leading a retreat. There was a young mother who left her 2 young girls at home for the first time she'd been away. And she shared a fair bit in the beginning of just how nervous she felt, how kind of guilty she felt. She was really anxious, but threw herself into the retreat and had an amazing journey. Challenging retreat, but some really, really powerful, wonderful experience. She left feeling great. It was like 4 or 6 months later, she was back for another retreat. I said, my God, you're here again. And she said, the retreat was amazing. She said, there's just so much. Just felt like I could kind of just be with it and let it go. And I went home so full of light and joy. And then it faded, over time. And one morning, my girls came up to me and they said, Mommy, you know that place you went away to before? You might want to think about going back there. And she said, this retreat, when I'm going through a tough time, I remember that I'm not practicing just for me. I'm practicing for them. Remembering the why can be so powerful. You're doing this for yourself, but also you're doing it for others. There's something way back in 1976 called the Maharishi Effect, where Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of TM, said if 1% of a population is meditating, it'll create a shift in consciousness. They've done all these studies, and it seems that there's something to this. And what if it's true? What if your practice, and what if the collective of our practice here actually affected the whole of society? That juices me up in my practice. As you take this time to befriend your body, to again and again relax and re-arrive. It is such a practice of deep, deep listening. There's a story of a student who went to his meditation teacher, said, "I just want you to know I quit." And the teacher said, "Oh, I'd like to know why." And the student said, "Well, your instructions are all over the place. I'm listening to you give advice to people. You're telling one person to sit up straighter, and you're telling the next person to take more breaks and drink more tea and go for walks. I just can't stand your loosey-goosey teaching." And the teacher smiled and said, "I am teaching the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose." And here I find this to be such an important part of practice. To think of your practice as self-awareness and self-diagnosis. If you're overcome by fatigue, listen to your body, ask what your body needs, and notice what happens if you respond. There's a possibility that your body doesn't lie. Take that time for extra rest, and you may find that if you give yourself deeply to the call for rest, you may begin to feel an aliveness inside that begins to emerge over time. If you find yourself overcome with restlessness, take some time just to sense, what would be balancing for me right now? You may find yourself called for some walking meditation, or maybe something a little more vigorous. And I think that because you are on in many ways, your own self-guided retreat, this practice of deep inner listening to the body becomes more and more important. Honor the body's calling. Imagine that the body doesn't lie. And everything you do with your body, sense if you can make it a meditation. The washing dishes meditation. The taking a shower meditation. This is such an incredible time of practice. And to trust deeply, the more you soften and listen, the more that felt sense of the body will begin to arise. And the more you may begin to find an amazing ally in your practice. Let's close our eyes, and we're going to end with a short little reading and a very short meditation. As you close your eyes, you might take 3 slow, deep breaths. What could soften right now? What could relax? Letting these words from Robert Hall in this poem, "Within the Body You Are Wearing," letting these words just resonate for you. Within the body you are wearing, now inside the bones and beating in the heart, lives the one you have been searching for so long. But you must stop running away and shake hands. The meeting doesn't happen without your presence, your participation. The same one waiting for you there is moving in the trees, glistening on the water, growing in the grasses and lurking in the shadows you create. You have nowhere to go. The marriage happened long ago. And as you're ready, you might gently deepen the breath. Take a moment to listen inside and ask how your body might like you to move, and take a moment to stretch and move in any way that feels good for you. Thank you so much for your time and attention. It's an honor to share these practices with you. May you and your body have a wonderful retreat together. Thank you so much, and many blessings.